Hey, what's been good about your day? It's time for story time with Mrs. Newport. I hope you're ready to get back into Heaven Changes Everything by Todd and Sonja Burpo. We're on chapter 33. It's called A Child's Prayer. It says, one of the great blessings of our lives as parents has been listening to our kids pray. When they are small, children pray without the showiness that sometimes creeps into our prayers as grown-ups, without the sort of prayer ease, a language meant to appeal to more than anyone listening to God. And when Colton and Cassie offered prayers in their plain, earnest way, it seemed that God answered. Sonja says, when Heaven is for Real became a New York Times bestseller, Todd and I didn't know what to think of it. When it stayed at the top of the bestseller list, we really didn't know what to think. But we vividly remember that day when when Colby was about 4, came into the room and announced in a very Colton-like way, "I know why Heaven is for Real is number 1. We tuned in, wondering where he was going to say. "It's because of me," he said. "Well, God too. But I've been praying for that. That's why the book's number 1. While Colton is our rather quiet, sensitive, matter-of-fact child, Colby, now 7, is our family comedian and also our family inspiration when it comes to having an amazing prayer life. I pray with Colby at bedtime. I prayed that with Colton and Cassie too when they were young, but now that they're older, they pray on their own. One night, as Colby and I prayed together, he remembered that we had prayed earlier that day as a family, asking God to give us just the right words to say in an upcoming national television interview. That night, Colby prayed that Colton would do good in the interview. And I have to tell you, the next day, when the host of the Christian TV program turned to Colton and without having mentioned it to him beforehand, asked him to pray to close the interview, Colton absolutely knocked it out of the park. It's the prayer we share on page 233 at the end of the book. We'll get to that. He prayed confidently but humbly, asking God to reach the unbelievers. It was a short but powerful prayer that basically left all of us breathless. When we called home and told Colby and Cassie about it, Colby had his usual answer ready. "I prayed for that." All his life, Colby has seen his parents and siblings praying, but I think it's been Colton's prayers that have influenced him most. Colby has the sweetest, closest conversations with God. I think of adults who are shy about praying aloud in front of others, and I wish they could have the innocent attitude toward prayer that Colby has. He understands, though, that God doesn't always answer our prayers the way that we hope. When our friend Wilfred underwent heart surgery, Colby took full credit for his surviving for 60 days following the surgery because he had prayed for him nearly every night. But when came the day when Wilfred died, we dreaded telling Colby, but he knew we had to. Finally, I took him aside, knelt down in front of him and said, "Colby, Jesus took Wilfred to heaven." His shoulders sagged, and he looked sad, but didn't say anything. We didn't know how he processed the news, but at prayer time that night, we sat down together and he said, "Mom, can I pray first?" "Sure," I said. "Go ahead, Colby." He bowed his head, put his hands together and said, "God, I just pray you give Wilfred a really good time in heaven." Then he looked at me. "Okay, Mom, your turn," he said. I couldn't speak. Everything I would have said, Colby had summed up in those few faith-filled words. "Mom, your turn." "I can't." "You have to. It's your turn." I couldn't trust my voice not to break. All I could squeak out without sobbing was to say what Colby said. "Jesus, amen." Sometimes we wonder if our kids can understand what we may think are adult situations beyond their comprehension, like a Christian friend's death, even though we prayed he would live, when in fact the kids may be way ahead of us. That was certainly the case when Wilfred died. While all of us adults were stuck in our earthly grief, Colby was already picturing our friend's arrival in heaven and asking God to show him a good time. Sometimes adults think they have to speak in flowery prayers when they're praying, but I'm convinced that our children's simple prayers fall as sweetly on God's ears as they do on ours. We should all speak so simply to each other and to God. As an example, Colby recently prayed for another friend, an elderly church member, Ruby, whose vision has been failing, causing her to suffer some falls. One night, as we knelt together by Colby's bed, he prayed, "Dear Jesus, please help Ruby's heart keep beating so she stays alive, and help her when she falls down. She's been falling down a lot lately, Jesus, and I don't want her to get hurt." Children's prayers are precious and powerful, full of the simplest and purest joy, love, and faith. If you're one of those people who have had a hard time putting voice to your prayers, let your young children's prayers be your guide. This chapter ends with Matthew 19:14. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Let's read chapter 34. A perfectly normal pastor's family is imperfect. As for Colton, he'll turn 11 this month, and in September will enter the 6th grade. He's a regular kid in every way. Sonja says, as we write this book, Colton's still a regular kid, and now he's a teenager, which means that like every teenager, he has his faults and eccentricities. He is very matter-of-fact and precise. When I'm away from home and call to ask him what time he went to bed the night before, he may say 9:31, not around 9:30, not a little before 10, not 9:31. That's what he says. It makes me laugh. It's one of the most endearing qualities that we've seen all his life. Throughout the years since he started telling us about his visit to heaven, if we said anything that didn't quite jive with what we had seen or experienced there, he was quick to correct us. Like the time Todd asked Colton what he did in heaven when it got dark. Colton wasn't having it. He said, "It doesn't get dark in heaven, Dad. We told you. Who told you that?" If only he could be so particular about his household chores. But no, he's an ordinary teenager pushing the envelope occasionally. Not long ago, I got suspicious about the condition of his clothes. Todd and I want our kids to grow up learning to be independent, so as soon as they are 10 years old, they do their own laundry. At least once a week, they either wash, dry, or put away their own clothes, or they go naked or stink. Those are the choices. At least that's how it's supposed to work. But a year or so ago, I wasn't seeing any evidence that Colton was doing his laundry. A week went by and there were no Colton clothes in the laundry room. Another week and still nothing. Finally asked Colton, "What's the deal with your laundry? Have you washed your clothes?" He assured me all was well. "I've got it covered, Mom." That wasn't exactly the answer I was looking for. "What do you mean you've got it covered? Have you washed your clothes?" I asked again. "It's okay, Mom. I took care of it," he said confidently. "Colton, have you washed your clothes?" "Mom, really, it's okay. I axed everything." "You what?" "I axed it. You know, sprayed everything with Axe." In case you don't have a teenage boy in your house, Axe is a men's body spray that's very trendy right now. Not exactly what moms have in mind as a substitute for washing a teenage boy's laundry. That day, Colton and his mother, in a very large stinky load of laundry, had what we call in our house a come to Jesus moment. A session of confession, apology, and then action. In Colton's case, an afternoon spent doing his laundry. Like I said, Colton's a regular kid, a good kid. Polite, fun, strong in his faith, good musician, and a good athlete. But occasionally, ornery too. Here's a reminder to us that God uses ordinary people, and sometimes the least expected people, to do his work on earth. Not that Colton can be compared with Jesus in the work he did, but being the mother of 2 sons, sometimes I wonder about Jesus as a boy. The Bible tells us that he was fully human, and that makes me wonder if as a youngster he might have frustrated his mother, Mary, now and then. And I'm not just talking about the time he went missing as the family was traveling home with a crowd from Jerusalem, and they later found him teaching in the temple. I'm wondering if there were times when he didn't carry in the water jugs when he was supposed to, or maybe stayed too long at a friend's house, riding stick horses or climbing trees, or if he and his friends were caught playing on the riverbank when they'd been told to not go there without an adult. When I get to heaven, I may just ask Mary, did Jesus ever get spanked or have to do a timeout? I know Jesus never sinned, but he was still a boy. While moms and dads are always on the lookout for our kids' misbehavior and perhaps occasionally sniffing their gym clothes to see if they're being washed or axed, I was reminded recently that we also need to keep an eye out for those thoughtful and helpful things they do as well. Another independence training thing we practice in our family is that as soon as our kids could read reasonably well, they started ordering for themselves when we eat out at a restaurant. Usually Todd or I order, and then the server may ask, "And the kids?" Todd answers, "They'll order for themselves," and they do. In our little town, the restaurants serve home-style food. It's not like the kids have to be able to read French or Italian or figure out some fancy menu descriptions. So it's not a problem for Cassie and Colton. But Colby, at 7, still needs help occasionally, especially if we go to a new place. What we hope he'll do is ask us or ask the server for help if there are words he can't figure out. But he wants to be a big guy like his teenage siblings, so he usually sees that option as a last resort. But recently a friend pointed out to us that when we're in a restaurant where Colby's not familiar with the menu, Colton will find out what Colby wants and then help him order it. To be honest, that surprised me. I had just told his friends that Colton tended to pick on Colby, like some big brothers are known to do. That's when he reminded me that what had happened when we had been to Quiznos the day before. When we were in line, our friend Debbie pointed out that Colton told the order taker, "And my brother will have..." I had totally overlooked that little deed of kindness, probably remembering instead that Colton had made fun of Colby later for ketchup on his cheek or shredded cheese on his lap. But it was true. He did order for his younger brother. Just as an aside to give you another glimpse into our ordinary family, I insisted that our kids write down 3 goals for the year. A couple of them wrote down that they would read their Bible every day. One of Colby's goals is to take a shower every day, a goal for which we're all thankful. My point in writing this reading is to nudge you to look for the good in people, especially your kids, and also to remind you that the people around you, your friends and family members, and even strangers, may be as ordinary as you are, and yet in God's eyes, they're special creations that He may be used to touch a life for good. That ordinary person doing God's work might even be you. People like to be appreciated. Whose deed of kindness can you thank someone for before today ends? Who knows? It might be your child's. This chapter ends with Mark 14:6 and 9. "She did an excellent thing for me. I tell you the truth. Wherever the good news is preached in all the world, what this woman has done will be told, and people will remember her." I hope you thank somebody today for something that they've done. Have a great day. See you next time. Bye.